Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rise and Glide podcast brought to you by Paddleboarding. My name is Maddie LeBlanc, and I'm joined here today with my co-host Holly Pye. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Scotty Warren, who is the race director right now of the GBSUP Series, which is pretty cool. But his background really stems from like life-saving and coaching. He trains other athletes as well. And he also comes from a very competitive athletic background as well. But now it's really cool, like the conversation we got to have with Scotty, to really listen to his story about the community aspect. And if he didn't step into his role as the director of the GBSUP series, that community probably wouldn't really exist anymore to this day. Eh, Holly? Is that a bit of an overstatement?
No, it's a really interesting point. I mean, I've known Scotty for years, and yeah, our national series, the GBSUP series, there's a whole series of races over Great Britain throughout the year, every year, and you get points each event, and overall there's like a winner, and it's a really good community. But the previous director had some health problems and had to step down from the role, and there was nobody to pick it up again, so it was just going to fizzle out, and there might be a few independent races here and there, but there wasn't going to be a series. So yeah, Scott decided to take on that role. I'm not sure if he fully knew kind of how much work it would be at the time, but he's completely committed, and Scott is somebody who truly is, I truly believe he's in it because he's passionate about increasing participation in levels, improving the safety in stand-up paddling, improving the community aspect, and really just improving people's skills and enjoyment on the water as well. He's a lifeboat volunteer. He is also, you mentioned, a coach. He truly just wants people to get the most out of their paddling, and it was a super good conversation. I think he's been in it for an awful long time. He's been paddling for years and years and years. He's been paddling since before I even knew paddling existed. So I think we did go back in time a little bit in this episode. We looked at the past, present and future, and it was really good to hear his insights. And I'm also really glad that he made the time for our podcast, because I can't imagine how busy he is with working, race directing, not just one but like 9 events a year or more maybe, volunteering for the lifeboat, running a family, and everything else in between. So yeah, it was a super cool conversation. I really enjoyed sitting down and having a proper chat with him, rather than rushing around at events and saying hi and bye. So yeah, really nice. And yeah.
So Holly, you're basically telling me then that Scotty has legendary status.
I would say so. Yeah, if that's a thing, definitely he's deserving of it, especially for our national series. So let's get into the episode and let everybody else also listen to how awesome he is and what he does for our sport. And let's go.
Welcome, Scotty. How are you doing this morning? Well, it's morning here in North America, actually.
It's
Not in your neck
just
of the
gone
woods.
lunchtime. No, it's just gone lunchtime. So all good here. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I've enjoyed listening to the podcast so far.
We love it. Confirmation bias at its finest. We're pretty stoked to have you here today. You have quite a huge list of accolades beside your name. I had read your article like a few weeks ago that just came out about your experience being a race director and a racer. You're also a coach. You're a family man. You got a lot going on. So we have a lot of topics that we are really stoked to dive in with you today. But first and foremost, I guess, can you tell us a little bit about your stand-up paddling experience and how you just got into the sport in general?
Yeah, sure. So it all started back in probably about 2008, actually. I was a wannabe surfer at the time, so just got into surfing because I moved to Plymouth, which Holly will know very well. Went down there for university. always trying to go out surfing at Bantham, always too windy. And then, I often see some of the legends of the windsurfing scene in the UK down there, thinking, I need to get into that. Of course, I was a student, so I couldn't afford it at all. And then had visions of being, Laird Hamilton or Dave Clam or something like that on a paddleboard. Maybe I can do this. So I went to see one of the local retailers down there, Dave at Reactive. He's like, you still can't afford that, but at least it's a little bit cheaper than windsurfing, right? So he says, come down to the shop, jump on a board, see if you like it. And then that's it. That started the journey then. So I convinced my mum to buy me a board for Christmas, or give me some money for a board for Christmas. And then started heading out at, instead of the windy days at Bantham, the flat days at Bantham, and then caught some small waves, and it started that way. So that was like 2008, 2009. And then it's gone from there. And, I've been involved in so much stuff since then. It's just keeps evolving and keeps taking me down a new path, which has been amazing, from, working with clubs and schools and instruction to working for brands and retailers, and then now race directing and coaching. So who knows what's next? Been there, done that. Probably got a T-shirt, you could probably say.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I think when I first met you, Scott, you were, I think, working for one of the brands, working for Starboard in the UK.
That's right, yeah.
At what point, how did you kind of transition from giving paddling a go to working for Starboard? What turned it from, something to have a go at, to a passion that you wanted to kind of evolve your life around?
Yeah. Well, I had a background in retail anyway, so I was working in skate and ski, basically, snowboard stuff. So all action sports at the time, and during that sort of period, so I started at Tushingham for Starboard in 2013. So just before that, I was running Central SUP, which is the first SUP club here in the Midlands. So I then became a team rider for Starboard, because we were obviously selling the kit. I just got into the racing side of things a couple of years before. And then it kind of just came about. They want a new sales guy, basically. And I put my hand up and I said, I really want to do this. Got no idea what to do, but let me give it a go. And they said yes. And so I got involved that way. But, before that, I'd done quite a bit already with Central SUP. So we were selling the kit anyway. We were doing, obviously, instruction. We were already running races by then as well. So sort of a natural progress from being, a keen enthusiast to a team rider on their new program, and then into the role. So that sort of opened the doors then. Of course, then, you started meeting all the people around the UK and selling to all the shops and meeting all the the families and the people behind it, like yourself, Holly, and obviously Ben, and, and then inspiring people to sort of get involved in the sport more. So that's where it all started. Non-stop since then, really.
Yeah, sounds like it. And you've also done, you've covered SUP in basically every industry possible, from sales to coaching to taking part yourself to race directing to safety to being part of, the Paddle UK groups, to being ambassadors for certain brands like Paddlogger. It sounds like you've pretty much covered every base so far, and not stopping anytime soon. So we're really excited to hear more about the whole journey. And so now you're not currently working for one of the paddling brands. I think you're mainly coaching and running GBSUP as kind of your paddling related activities. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So it was interesting, actually, because 2019, so my first kid came along, Harrison, 2019. So I was competing full time at that point, right? So actually against Ben, we had a great season, 2017, 2018. Obviously your brother. So, competing full time, essentially that was the go-to thing. And I was working at one of the lakes here, Bray Lake, as a sort of SUP manager, if you like. So running their retail store, doing their coaching, all the club program, and all that sort of stuff. So trying to get to races was always tricky. But then 2019 became even harder, because suddenly I got this thing I've got to look after and, keep alive. So that was a challenge. And actually, obviously then COVID hit, and it just changed the game, didn't it, completely? And then a friend of mine, Adrian, was involved in GBSUP anyway. And so he was helping to run the series, obviously helping to run the events. And he kept asking me, actually since 2019, can you come and get involved? And I said, no, I don't want to. He said, why not? I said, it's too much hard work. I don't want to do it at all. So he's then convinced me finally in 2021 because he got left with the series completely by himself. And of course, after that whole COVID piece, it was a case of if we don't do anything now, it's what's the future going to be for racing in the UK. So he finally convinced me to get involved, and it was the mammoth task. It certainly was, because when we first opened the documentation that we had here, was like, there's nothing. How are we going to run a race series? We haven't even got safety documentation, haven't even got risk assessments, haven't got anything. So it was a bit of a crazy period, that actually. But at the same time, super interesting, and of course, roll the sleeves up, get involved, and then try and turn what was at the time essentially a dead series into what it now is again. So yeah, a bit crazy actually. But yeah, a lot of experience came from that. Obviously the marketing side of things, we're working with the brands and obviously the retailers and the clubs and schools and stuff. And obviously the safety side of things was a huge part of that. And I always remember the first race where we really put our own stamp on the series was a race we had in Kent here, which is called the Medway River Raid. And we turned up and had Kent Search and Rescue do our safety cover for us. And they had this huge van, which was their race control, essentially, or safety control, with this massive, great big aerial that came out of the top of this van, like a 40-foot aerial, so they could communicate down the river. And you can see all the paddlers turning up going, "Oh my God, what is this?" And it's like this huge safety control. And they're like, "We've never seen this before." And then we were like, safety is number one. First of all, it's going to be a safe and then fun race. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey really over those few years to get it going again.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I remember you guys putting that event on. I think I was hoping to go, but I was injured at the time, and racing was kind of out of my zone for a little while during that time. But when I guess since then, you've been a lot more involved both with the racing and coaching for paddlers of all abilities. I mean, you must see people coming to those events who are, top level and keen to race and super competitive, but also paddlers who are, just taking part for the fun of it and to challenge themselves. What's that kind of journey of other people like to see and to be a part of?
It's amazing actually, because a really good example actually from someone who's a good paddler already, has been paddling for a while. Just as a first sort of idea on this, I raced them actually. A guy called Simon Nash, probably know Simon from the UK scene. Really good paddler at a decent level in the UK. He goes and he trains all the time at Bray. He raced me at one of the local events earlier this year. I wasn't really ready for it. I took my foot off the gas because the event we were going for was cancelled. So it was just a case of, okay, I've got a free weekend now. Let's go and do this one instead. And he absolutely kicks my butt, flying along. And especially this one leg, there's like a long leg up the side of the lake, and I can't keep up with him. A few years ago, it'd be the opposite way around. And I said to him after, I said, "Simon, so what you doing there? What speeds you pulling, all that sort of stuff, as you do?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm doing that." And I said, "Yeah, you really look like you were gliding along." He's like, "Well, you taught me all this." It's like, "You should be doing it as well." I was like, "Well, yeah, okay. I suppose I did deny, so I can't really have a go at him for being too good, because I've done that. I gave him all the tips." That was really cool, actually. Then,
Yeah, he's a product of your hard work.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. The times used to go up and down the river by Bray, where we used to paddle all the time, and we'd run these drills about glide, and I said, "You've got to glide more. You've got to get 5%, 5%, 5%." Then he goes and does it, and I'm like, "Oh, should have told you that. Should have kept that to myself." But that's just one example. But it's great because obviously GBSUP, we get everybody turn up, from the likes of Simon, obviously yourself, Holly, and when we're doing especially the selection races, we get Blue come over and all that sort of stuff, and all our top paddlers there. But what's really great is seeing the challenge tour and then the novice paddlers, if you like, the novice racers coming into it. So there's a couple of groups that I've worked with recently, Frangipani Sup and Epic Life, and they've been coming down en masse to the events recently, and seeing them be able to, like Oxford, which we just ran last weekend, was crazy conditions, like 20 odd mile an hour winds, no shelter at all. So cross chop, upwind, downwind, complete mess, because it's a hard sided reservoir, so there's no shelter at all, and the chops just bouncing all over the place. And seeing those relatively new paddlers coming into it and giving it a go and actually getting around the course, you just think that's amazing, isn't it? Because you say even last year they probably wouldn't have done that, but just encourage and say you can do it. Just go out there. If you pull out, you pull out. And no one's going to have a shameful look at you because the conditions are so bad. Yeah, they're saying, "Would you paddle it?" I'm like, "Not really, not really, to be honest. But I'm going to stick you out there because I'm race director. I can do that." And seeing them, absolutely challenge themselves to their limit is amazing. And it takes them, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is to do the event. It's incredible because they just don't give up. And that's so inspiring because you think, oh, if they don't give up, I can't step away because they're, wanting to do this. It's absolutely amazing. And it always reminds me of years and years ago. This was 2015, I think, 16. And I was getting into the racing proper by that point. And I remember one example of a lady who it always sticks in my mind. Every time I'm having like a hard time on the water or a hard time of anything, like I need to give up. I don't want to do this anymore. So I raced a 10-mile race at Alton Water, and I lost the race because I didn't have a weed fin on. And ultimately, Carl, who's sort of a really good racer back in that day, beat me by less than a minute. I just couldn't keep up with him because he could cut the corner slightly, he had the weed fin, and I had such a hissy fit. I was there at the back of the van, everything was coming out of it. I was throwing things around. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And my girlfriend at the time came over to me and said, "What are you doing? What are you behaving like this for?" I was like, "Oh, I should have beaten him. I should have won. I really want to do well this year." All that sort of stuff. Too much pressure. And she goes, "Wilma is still paddling." I'm like, "What do you mean still paddling? Like this is an hour and a half after I'd finished. Like she's still going around. She's just starting her last lap." I'm like, "What? Why? What?" And then, of course, it twigged. She's been paddling for 3.5 hours. She's still going. She's still got a full lap to do. So she's going to be out there for another 45 minutes. So she's paddling for harder, for longer than I am. And I've just had this massive hissy fit. So I got changed, got back in the water and paddled around. And since then, I always have that mindset of, okay, you finish first or you finish fifth and you do really well. It's amazing. Yes, you put the training in. Yes, you put the graft in, all that sort of stuff. But actually, it's the person that's at the back of the fleet or the person that's come from injury or the person that's, can't get out and training because their job, their life, their work, their family, whatever else. And it's them that actually are the true heroes because they're the ones that are physically putting the effort in possibly for twice as long as in Wilma's case. And that always inspires me.
Absolutely. I'm so curious to hear from you. Like, how has your perspective shifted from then being a racer and like having that competitive mindset and knowing like, okay, yeah, you know what, it's not just about me, it's about everybody else that's out here in the community. But now to more so like being a coach, do you find that like challenging sometimes to be in that position where like, you can have that drive, you can have that competitiveness and you have that fire, but then also like being a coach is kind of like the other end of the spectrum, right? Like I feel like when you're an athlete, it's so easy to be so not like necessarily self-centered, but it's so easy to be caught up like in your own world and in your own game, what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, to being a coach, which is a little more selfless and a little more dedication to others. And so like, is there anything actually too specifically that you've learned from being a coach that helps you as an athlete while you still race?
Definitely. And it's on one hand, it's the biggest challenge I've ever faced in terms of switching that mindset because you're going from, like you say, that completely focused, driven, I've got my time, I've got my goal, I've got my training, all that sort of stuff. Is my nutrition right on the day and all that sort of thing that you go through, to complete the opposite end of the scale where you go in, okay, well, how do I look at this from their point of view? Can I put myself in their shoes? And if it's somebody like Simon Nash, who's relatively close in terms of performance to what I was doing, that's easy. It's when you go to somebody else who's, new to the sport or paddling differently to you, that's a real big challenge because you're sort of trying to figure out, how they would do it, how they would cope. So what I think definitely the coaching side of thing has given me that ability to look at it from the bigger picture. so I go to a given race, and I can see where the challenges will be for any given person, I think, which is quite nice in that respect. And you also you build up a degree of patience as well, because everybody learns differently. Everybody's slightly different in the way they approach these things, right? So it gives me a bit of patience there. I'll listen to people a lot better now, because they'll come to me and say something. I have to try and understand that, interpret that, but also make a quick decision and make a direction. And I had one of the ladies that I've worked with over, every now and then over a few years now. She came to me recently and said, I just feel like my paddling's just not working at the moment. I'm like, okay, well, let's just come and have a session. We'll just have a look. And she goes up and down only twice, and I just go to, what are you doing? Well,
Called out.
who are you? Yeah, just straight away. She kind of paddled for more than 100 meters, and she wasn't warmed up or anything. I mean, and you know as well as I do that you've got to get into the groove, haven't you? That comes with a bit of time on the water. But I was like, what are you doing? Where all these habits come from? And the lady is she's a coach herself, right? But she does a lot of stuff at beginner level, and a lot of stuff with school groups in the summer. Spends a lot of time actually in a kayak, and she just hadn't been able to switch that mindset. So it was really interesting to teach her that side of things rather than the technique side of things, the physical stuff, like move your hand, change your feet, all that sort of stuff. It was actually more of a case of, okay, you just switch on. Let's teach you how to switch on, and face what you're gonna face. And she's a great paddler. She's got bucket loads of technique, more than I have, to be honest. And she can paddle lots of different craft. I go in a kayak and I go around in circles, so I definitely can't do that. Where she's really good. So teaching the mindset piece of, okay, now it's my time. I'm going for my training session, or I'm going to go racing. This is my challenge. How do I face that, rather than just what you need to do with your technique and stuff. And that was really interesting. So coaching gives me a really interesting book. It's also interesting from the other side of it as a race director. The coaching, and especially being a former racer, is really interesting, because quite often we see key people in the circuit. You get to know who they are, that will push the boundaries. I was one of them. I was always one of them that would find a little rule I could bend, or if I could take a little bit of something, I would totally do it. So I get it. And it's really funny, like at one of the races back to the Thames, Holly will know this race really well. It's kind of a tight start line, and everyone kind of goes to the left. I would always start on the right, because I could hang off a pontoon slightly back. And I used to check with the race director and the guy running the race called Brian. I always used to say to him every year, do you mind if I start back and come into the start? And he'd go, no. He would never say it at race briefing, but I would go and ask him personally. So I'd start, 5 meters further back and just roll into the start. No one ever picked me up on it, but I used to do it every year. So it's really interesting from a race director point of view, because you see people trying to do this stuff and you're like, I know what you're doing. And they try and argue with you and say, like, and it was really funny. We had a race on a river up at Nottingham, and in all honesty, as a small team, you can't cover the whole course. There's going to be blind spots, on a river course. So 5 kilometers downstream and 5 kilometers back. So we got the drone and we've got spotters, but there's obviously points where if someone wanted to take advantage, they could take advantage. And then there was 3 paddlers that day that actually all cut the last corner. And I had a conversation with one of the guys at the end. I said, I'm gonna knock some time off you. Not much, but you've definitely cut the corner. You've definitely gained an advantage, which is a big thing for me. It's not black and white. It's, do you gain an advantage or not? And he goes to me, no, I didn't. I said, you did. I could see you. I said, in all honesty, and I said, if I was you, I wouldn't have done it on that corner. I would have done it on the corner before where I couldn't see you. He goes, what, you telling me to cheat? And I said, no, I'm telling you to be sensible about when you cheat. So if you're going to do it where I can't see you, because that's the corner we had the drone up. That's the corner where we had, clear line of sight. So it gives you a real mix of views from a coaching point of view, and that patience and that understanding and that listening, to a race point of view saying, no, I've done this before, and,
Yeah.
and Holly, prime example here, actually, your race starter based up last year was absolutely genius. absolutely genius. I didn't see it because
I
that's
think that
actually
ruffled a few feathers.
What did you do? Oh my gosh, Holly, what did you do? Tell me,
I've let,
please tell me about
I've
this
let the
race
cat
start.
out
I
of the
need
bag
to
now.
know. What happened? What I need to know this race start. What happened?
I think, wasn't it? I can't fully remember, but I think it was quite a steep, it was quite a steep beach. We were going to beach start, but I think it was, I can't remember if it was because it was steep or something. It got deep very quickly, or there was some reason why.
Quite stony as well, wasn't it?
That was it. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
stony. That was it. So people didn't want to do a running beach start, which is fair enough. Totally understand that. And so I think you changed, or at briefing said, you don't need to do a running beach start. We can just stand like knee deep in water, holding the board, and then when the horn goes, you just get on the board and paddle off. But nobody said that you couldn't do a running beach start. And if you run, obviously you get a bit of momentum. So I was running, that was like the most stressed I have ever been, just 2 minutes before the start, because I'd gone off on a little warm-up paddle, and then I thought somebody said like 10 minutes to go or something, but they obviously said like 2 minutes to go. And they were setting the men off just before the women. So I was like heading back, because I didn't want to warm up and then stand around for like 20 minutes before actually setting off. I wanted to finish my warm up and then only have like not very long before we actually started. But suddenly the men were paddling at me and I was still on the water. And there was only like 3 minutes between the men and the women. And I was like, oh, shoot, like I need to get back quickly. So I was panicking. And then I got back to shore and I thought it was all okay. But I hadn't yet like safety pinned my race number to my leg. And my number was like in the car or something. So I was like, oh, shit, like I've got like 2 minutes now to leg it to the car, get my number, or wherever my number even is, put it on my leg. Like those safety pins are so fiddly when you have just like a pair of shorts. And I was like, when you're rushing and your hands don't even work properly, so the safety pin's not even going in. And anyway, and then I was like, do I even need this? And then there was literally like 10 seconds before the race was about to start. So everybody else was already lined up, knee deep in water. And I was looking around like, well, it would just be much quicker if I just stayed on the beach and then ran and then like glided onto the water before starting. So I did do that, and technically I did start behind the line, which was my argument, but obviously I had also a little bit of a head start from that kind of gliding motion. And yeah, I didn't win the race. I think I came like third or something, so I don't think I had any unfair benefits. But yeah, I don't think I was the only person that thought that was a good idea.
Well, it was. I thought it was absolutely genius because it was all down to the wording. So the actual wording was you can start up to knee deep in the water, but you must be at the shore edge. So where's that shore edge? So absolutely. Yeah. Someone came to me afterwards and said, "Well, we need to look at this," and they showed me a photo of Amanda's pictures. Like, yeah, completely fine. That's what I would have done.
Behind the line.
Fine, yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, absolutely, absolute genius. And it's that perspective of it's not just she wasn't on the start line and that's disqualification. No, that was what I said was this, and she's interpreted that exactly how I would have. So fair play, carry on. No,
I'm glad you guys were okay with that. Otherwise, I would have paddled like 10K for no reason.
But it's interesting because you look at the other end of the scale, and it's being comfortable in making that a difficult decision, isn't it? When things don't go to plan, and we've been there as well, Holly, as you well know from last year's Falmouth event. And actually being able to make that uncomfortable decision, say, yeah, actually no, you took advantage there, or that wasn't how we wanted to go, and actually being comfortable in that, and that comes from that. I think going back to your point, Maddie, about where does the coaching side of things come into it? It gives you that patience to view it and go, you know what, actually that's not working. Let's go and do something else, or let's find a solution here that will work collectively. And it gives you a real interesting view, I think, on things. And of course, in examples like Holly's beach style, fantastic, brilliant. That's exactly what I would have done. So go and do it.
Yeah, Holly, we end up asking Scotty, what are your challenges as a race director? Well, dealing with you. No.
No, but
No, it
you're
can't
so
be
right.
easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, because if I put those things into a perspective, it's like that's three different roles, right? Being an athlete, being a coach, and being a race director. And so I can't
And
even imagine.
unintentionally in there is like a paddling psychologist.
But that's actually true. Honestly, that could legitimately be a fourth role because like in each of those positions that you have to sit in, know what it's like. You know what it's like to be the athlete, you know what it's like to be the coach, and as a race director when you're trying to make these difficult decisions or tell this person, "Hey, like yeah, you have a bit of a time penalty because you cut this corner," or like knowing what the athlete was thinking in their head too. I'm sure that must be super beneficial, but also have its challenges at certain times as well, for sure.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you can put yourself in other people's shoes pretty easily, but at the same time, you're like, you know, trying to analyze why that was done, or what decision do you make because of that situation, and it's very easy then to go, oh, what if, and you're like, and then you go down a rabbit hole, and then you've lost your train of thought. So actually, what I tend to do actually is have a chat with. So we had one at the weekend, right? We had an appeal because it was super windy. In GBSUP, our general rule is you take 5 strokes on your knees. You've got to then stand back up. There's no limit to how much knee paddling you can do. Again, as long as you don't gain an advantage. But a good example this weekend was it was so windy that kind of rule then comes down to the race director's kind of discretion. Do you enforce that? Do you not? And it's so windy that it wasn't really enforced. That being said, there's people out there that are pushing themselves, trying to stand all the time because of that 5-stroke rule, and you can clearly see them not getting as far forward, especially upwind or crosswind, than the other paddlers, right? So someone comes to me and says, I want to raise an official appeal. Great, yeah, perfect. We've got the process for that. Raise that appeal. I think I lost out because I didn't kneel and I tried to stand. Yes, we can see that you did that. That's we've got that view of you. And then what I try and do now is work with our other key paddlers or event team. So we kind of form a committee, if you like, or a little panel to review this. So I pulled a couple of people aside and said, look, this has been raised to us. How would we deal with this? What's your thought on it as well? And again, it gives you that perception of trying to get a different mindset. And of course, then the decision then becomes quite straightforward because you're not just trying to second guess it. You can go, okay, yeah, I agree, or I don't agree, or yeah, it makes sense, or I was out there on the water. That's what we do. So it gives us a bit of knowledge in it as well, rather than just guessing it. But it's it's interesting. I often put a different hat on. So I put my paddle logger hat on as an athlete. I've got my booking here sessions hat as a race director, my communications hat, and I've got other ones for coaching and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. Keeps it interesting, but challenging.
Absolutely. I'm so curious to know, like, can you paint a picture actually for us of like what the GBSUP series looks like? Because I think, at least just from my perspective as a Canadian, we have a local series here. It's called the Ontario SUP series. Very small scale. Like, it actually sounds like to me you have a little bit more formal processes than like what we do here back at home. Can you kind of explain to our listeners actually like what is your series kind of about? How does it run? How many races do you have in a season? Like what does that look like for you?
It's funny actually because it kind of comes full circle back to me in some ways, which is quite hilarious. Because as I said earlier, when Adrian asked me to get involved, I was like, I don't want to get involved. It's too much hard work. I don't want that hassle. I want to go back to enjoying my paddling. I want to be a racer again. But back in 2011, I was running what was the first regional series in the UK. There was obviously races already going on, and we've got quite a mature race market here in the UK. Pretty much from day one, sort of 2006 time, there was races, or there was people getting involved in races. So it's not like we're doing anything new. So 2011, we did a first sort of regional series. There was the winter races going on. Some of the big races like Head of the Dark were already established. And that kind of led us to a case of saying, me and my friend Chris, who started Central Sup, well, surely there should be something more collectively, a way of working here, because there's these big events already. There's Base Up, Battle of Thames, I think, had just started, or was about to start, and Head of the Dark, which you probably know is, it's a huge long-standing event. I think they're 15 years or something into it now, aren't they? How do we connect them together? How do we form something that, means we're working to the same standards, the same practices, and all that sort of stuff? So we can turn up at any given race, and it's, you're going to get the same start procedure. You're going to get the same, rule set and things like that. So that was 2011. 2012, we started this initiative called GBSUP Clubs. A few of the early clubs were getting involved, and we all sat around at a sort of table, eat far too many biscuits, obviously. Didn't get anything done at all, but we did come out of it with a general consensus that something should happen. But what would that be? So that was the kind of start of the national series, if you like. It didn't actually take off until 2014 when UK SUP was formed. So the Drop the Clubs, UK SUP was formed, and that was the first national series. So it's been a long-standing thing. It became GBSUP in 2017. And so over the years, it basically connected all the existing events together to form a series, and it's had so many different formats and ideas behind it. It's always changed and really has its own evolution path down the years. All the way to, I think, 2015 we had 10 races, which was an absolute nightmare to get to because you couldn't drop points. So you had to go to all 10 if you wanted to do really well, because otherwise you gave points away. But that being said, because it's typically been a best of points model. So if it was 10 races, you had to get your best 7 would count. So you couldn't miss the other 3, because if you did, someone might turn up to an event where they could steal your points. But it's been flat water, it's been ocean, it's been technical, it's been sprint, it's been all sorts really. 2018, 2019, it was really well organized series in terms of branding, marketing, and all that sort of stuff. So we took it on then, obviously 2021, and it was literally dead in the water essentially. The organization that have run it before has completely folded. So we were like, okay, literally starting from scratch. And which was a shame, because it's by that point been in the UK as a national series, which covers for us, it's really interesting market actually. A national series to us is not just one country. I know I haven't got the scale of the States, and obviously some of the bigger countries around the world, but we consider Wales, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and Channel Islands, which all then have their own governing bodies as well. So in terms of trying to connect all those dots together, it's a real pain, to be honest. And it takes up a lot of my time now as we're trying to develop it. So, trying to work out what the national series should be. But essentially we run, this year we've got 7 national series events. So those national series events will give you your overall series position and your overall national ranking. Of those 7 events, we've changed it slightly, but essentially that best of model is still there. So you compete in 7 events. Essentially 4 of those events will count towards your series score. So you've got a bit of opportunity to drop a bad event, or if you can't make one, you're not going to necessarily miss out so much. We also then run the national championships, which is a standalone event, and that's where we run the selections for Team England and Team GB for the ISA and ICFs as well. And then we've also got our national sprint championships as well as a standalone event. So 9 events this year, physically running or organising or coordinating as part of that national calendar, really. So it's busy old year.
I was just about to say that sounds very busy, but that is quite fascinating that you have, like, I knew about your nationals as a standalone event, but you just said sprint nationals as well? You have a sprinting event?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of been in and out the calendar a few years, but now we're trying to bring it every year as an actual discipline. So we've got we ran it again last year for the first time at Nottingham, which is our national water sports centre here, where Paddle UK are based, as our now governing body, or one of the governing bodies. So we're going back then again this year to run that, and that's a standalone 200 metre sprint. that one. The first year we
200 meters.
did 500-meter sprints, and that was horrendous. So we won't do that again. That was absolutely hideous. So yeah, 500
Oh
meters.
my
Oh,
God. 500-meter
no thanks.
sprints, that's like marathon sprinting right there.
It was
I'd be dead
horrendous.
at 200. I'd be like, I can't make it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So
we all
200.
were. We all 500 doesn't sound that far. Like if you're when you're not used to sprinting, because I think that was also that was the first sprinting event that a lot of us had done, and probably not many people had trained just to like straight line sprints before, because all of the races in the UK had been like 10k or 12k or whatever, and we were all like, 500 meters. It's quite
No
far,
problem,
but
right?
yeah. And then after like you go like 100 meters flat out, and then you need a rest. It's like, oh, it's quite a long way to go still. But when you're in those lanes, because as Scott knows, but for you, Maddie, they like hold us probably similar to Florida last year. They like hold you in those buckets and then they drop and you go and you're in lanes. And I think no matter how far the distance, when you're like side by side with other people, it spread out in those lanes. It's not like you're drafting each other or whatever. You are just competitive. You can see somebody in your peripheral vision and you're just pushing it, and just gassed at the end. That's pretty horrific.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
absolutely mad. So we're hoping this year that we can. It's always been quite an elitist event, really, because it goes into the sprint regatta, national sprint regatta. So there's C1s, C2s, C4s, K1s. All the kayak contingents there, right? So it's I
Gotcha.
think last year they had like 400 races over the weekend. It was absolutely crazy. So we get a very small opportunity to paddle, right? So this year we're hoping to open it up to a bit more of a novice entry. So we're hoping to have a sort of pro fleet and then an amateur fleet, if you like, for want of a better word. So we're hoping to open that up because you have to have it's like a military event. You have to be off the water by this point, clear the lane, and the next one's already actually in some cases the 500-meter races they've already started and you're only halfway down the course because it's really time critical with how it runs. So we're hoping to open that up a little bit more this year. But yeah, we've got that as well. And the crazy thing about all this is the whole GBSUP team, we're all volunteers. We do it in our, I say spare time. I don't have any spare time, but we're all volunteers. And none of us do this for as a paid role. It's all volunteer for fun, I suppose. Fun's the word. Challenging
That's
fun.
Passion.
Yeah.
Passion, that's the word, isn't it? Passion.
Passion project.
Yeah, it's quite a big
That's
one.
quite fascinating, though. I think that is really, really cool because, I mean, anywhere else I've ever gone in the world, it seems like a lot of the canoe kayak sports don't have a chance to intertwine or really mix and mingle. So the fact that like this sprinting event is a part of that, like it's part of the C1 and K1 community, like that must be really cool exposure, I feel like, too, for the sport, for other paddling athletes to see. Like, yes, you can sprint in a stand-up paddleboard, but I'm curious to know, like, one thing I've been like dying to ask you is that then for that event, because last year at Worlds, the ICF changed the sprint to 100 meters, is that a factor in this year's event? Or is it still just like, nope, we're sticking with 200 meters. That's all we're doing. That's it, folks.
Yeah, we actually looked at it as soon as it was announced. We're like, oh, how are we gonna do this? Because we kind of sit almost dead down the middle of ISA and ICF with our formats and categories and rules and things like that. So we kind of take a sort of middle ground. We kind of take the best of both, but then apply it to what we think's best for the UK. As soon as they announced it, we're like, we need to look at this. And I was like, there's no chance because Nottingham's set up for the kayak and canoe world. So it's 200 meter, 500 meter, 1,000 meter, 2,000 meter. And they've got obviously the bucket starts. I think you had at Sarasota, right? So they can't physically move them because they're literally bolted to the bottom of the lake. So there's no way we can actually run 100 meter there because there's no infrastructure to start it unless we did it manually. Which so it have to be 200 meter, I'm afraid. So we've got to keep training for 200 meters at this point. But we've also got some really cool locations this year. We're going to Liverpool Docks, which would be quite nice. So iconic location. So city of culture, and the docks are incredible in terms of imagery and a iconic location with the Beatles being there and all the stuff around Liverpool's maritime history. But that gives us opportunities to run short 100-meter sprints or tech sprints or things like that as well. So we'll do some fun stuff around that event. But yeah, it's still going to be 200 meters, unfortunately. So we can't quite change it because they physically don't have the buckets at 100-meter, unfortunately. But, we'll see.
Wow.
We'll see how it goes in a couple of years. But it's nice because like you say, like last year I actually competed as well. So I was competing, running to the commentary booth, jumping on the mic and actually doing a bit of commentary for the next couple of heats coming through, to try and give the canoe and kayak world a bit of an insight into how we paddle and how it's it looks very different, doesn't it? You see a K1 especially coming down the track, they are so smooth in the water, aren't they? Just flying along. And then you see Ginny won last year's sprints, for example, and she's got loads of power and she's bouncing along and it looks really energetic, looks totally different, totally inefficient as well, doesn't it, compared to a K1? So trying to explain why that is, it was quite interesting. And we had a fair few clubs actually come up to us and say, what else you do? And you go, okay, well, we do like the GBSUP series. We're generally sort of what I'd call short course stuff really these days, because obviously there's things like the Yukon, isn't it, which is ultra stuff. So we generally do things from 200-meter sprints to about 16K really is our biggest. So it's not super long. So short course stuff. Most of our sweet spot is sort of 10K stuff. But even then, they're going, how long does that take you? And I'm like, well, the likes of Holly, I mean, what's your best 10K time? They go, really? That quick? And I go, yeah, it's pretty quick, actually. And they go, you can paddle one of these things for that long, for that quick? I'm like, yeah, we do, yeah. And they can't get their head around it still, which is amazing, because although we're integrated in that sense, they don't see a lot of the the high end of the sport. They see a lot of the recreational stuff, which is obviously more around a social experience or gentle paddle, which is actually really nice, obviously. But yeah, they just can't get their head around the fact that you can paddle one of these things that quick. That's quite an interesting conversation normally.
All this talk about kind of racing now and how GBSUP is now has got me wondering how different things used to be. So you mentioned you started paddling in 2008. I appreciate you maybe didn't start racing straight away, but just the paddling scene as a whole, how was it different then, whether it's racing, surfing, sup polo, all the different disciplines of paddling that you love so much? How do you notice that things have changed over the years?
I'd say it's like night and day. It's massively different. When I started, you had to be in your 40s. You had to have a T5 van. You had to have loads of money, and you were literally if you weren't a middle-aged man who could afford to buy one of these boards, you just didn't do it. All my friends were surfers at university. We're all sort of like 18, 19, 20, and they're going, how are you going to afford one of them? The only person you ever saw at the surf break was that typical middle-aged guy, who could afford one. So it was really niche back in the day, and from a culture point of view, it was surfing, and that was it. If you weren't a surfer, you didn't paddle surf, and all that sort of stuff. And then like now, it's so much more accessible, isn't it? And you've seen this all over the world, haven't we? But especially here in the UK, the COVID pandemic, and obviously that ability to get on the water was still there, wasn't it? It went absolutely crazy. So we'd go out, just before lockdown, we were paddling at Bray on the river. You'd see one group go out for a social paddle. That was it. And you could paddle for 15, 16 miles, or some of our longest paddles we did up the various locks. You wouldn't see a single other person on the water apart from this one group. Post lockdown, literally, a few months later, there's like 5, 6 groups out on this one paddle. And you're like, where have you all come from? It's just totally different. And when I was at Starboard, for example, and we did a lot of our market analysis, and obviously Red Paddle Co was a big brand then for the UK, and you do a lot of market analysis, and actually the percentage of boards sold and compared to the level of board that was being sold, so beginner boards to race boards, majority of them were sort of progressive or race boards. A lot of people use race boards as their day tourers, for example. Now it's completely opposite. The racer is almost the minority, and people go to oh, I didn't know you could race one of those. What's that? It's like a canoe. It's gone back to that point of view of being almost an unknown thing actually at the sharp end. So that recreational point of view is absolutely huge here. And we can go out training or just for, a morning session here, and you'll see 3 or 4 people out on, an inflatable board, getting out there, just enjoying being on the water in the morning. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's so much more accessible. You know, I have obviously loads of pictures of when I first started, because it was like, oh, look what I'm doing. I'm going to share this with everybody and post it everywhere. And there's a few images. And there's one image of me when I first started. I'll be in my work gear. I got my little 2 Seasons hoodie on. I took my shoes off and jump on the board. Got no leash, no PFD, no buoyancy aid. I'm on a lake that I've hopped the fence to get onto because I'm so desperate to get on the water, because I didn't know about water access, didn't know about any of that sort of stuff. But it's funny because if I post that photo now, it gets loads of comments saying, oh, where's your lease? Did you have permission there? Oh, I didn't know, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, back then we just didn't know. There was none of that information about safety. There was none of that information about where you could or couldn't paddle, or why you should go there or not paddle. I used to go to sailing clubs and say, can I come for a paddle? And they go, well, no. I'm like, why not? Well, we don't allow paddleboarding here. Do you even know what it is? No, but we don't allow it because they just didn't know what it was. Whereas now it's so much more mainstream in that respect, isn't it? But it's totally changed. It's a different thing. Some of the stuff we used to do back in early 2010s, you just couldn't do now. You go for a paddle on the canal and you just be in your flip flops and your shorts. People look at you like, what are you doing? And likewise, I'm involved in lots of different stuff, as you kind of allude to already. So working with Paddle UK on the advisory board. I'm working with the European Canoe Association, obviously GBSUP, coaching. And so if I go out for paddle, I actually go, well, maybe I should take a radio now. Or maybe I should have a PFD now. Do you actually need them? Debatable, isn't it, depending on your experience and where you're paddling. But actually it's that perception, isn't it, which I think has changed massively. Back in the day, you were just a surfer. It was like, well, who is this guy who's turning up at the canal with his board in the Midlands and going for a paddle? They thought you're absolutely crazy. Whereas now it's an everyday occurrence, isn't it? I tell you what, the one thing that's changed the most, actually, I always laugh about this when we go to a race event or go to a coaching session with groups, is that paddling used to be quite a peaceful thing. You get to the car park, don't you? You take your board off the roof because it was hardboard. Didn't have inflatables back in 2008, 2009, really. You have a little chat, you get in the water, you paddle away. People don't even know you're there. You turn up to a car park now, it's isn't it, all in pumps? It's funny, when you think about it, you go to a car park now, you can't help yourself, but you just, this noise of these electric pumps, right? So that's another way it's changed. Which it'll make you laugh now when every time you go for a paddle now, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Do you know what? I didn't even know they existed, but last summer I was near where I live. There's there's not many paddlers. There is a few, but there's basically a car park by the entrance to the river where I sometimes get on the water, and a lot of people in the summer will go there with their inflatable boards and just poodle about on the river. And I used to, not so much now, but I used to go super early in the morning, like 5:30 before work. And in the summer, it's obviously it's light at that time. And there was another person who was often out at the same time with an inflatable. And when I would get back, they had, I think actually Red Paddle Co. or Red Equipment sell it. But I didn't know it existed, like a sound.
The sound deadener thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Because they were deflating their boards at like 6 in the morning. They didn't want to wake up everybody in the houses nearby, so they put this like thing in the valve so that when they let the air out, it didn't go like really loud. It was like super quiet, and I was like, I didn't even know that existed. Like, we are on a whole other level of, I don't know, community noise control now. But yeah, the electric pumps are a bit annoying.
But that shows you that,
fascinating.
the fact that they're thinking I've got to design and make this product and sell it just shows you how much it's changed. I bought my first board. You couldn't buy a flat water leash; they didn't exist. You bought a surfing leash. Flat water, paddling as a whole just wasn't a thing. And yet, obviously, canoeing and kayaking was absolutely massive in the UK. Inland paddling is like it's now massive. But you couldn't buy half of the kit you can buy now. Specialist stuff
Yeah.
for those given occasions. So yeah, but another way it's changed massively is like when I started paddling. Really, the only go-to organisation in the UK was BSUPA, British Stand-Up Paddleboarding Association. So they ran some of the first sort of big events, championships, team selections. You either had them or the ASI to do your training with if you want to become a school or instructor. And so that was it really. Surfing England was the NGB quite early on, but never really took it under their wing. It was always part of what they offered because of the international team selection stuff, but never really something they got involved with hugely. They left it to be super really. But now, like I kind of said this earlier, in the UK we've got a really crazy market because we've got obviously our home nations as we call it. So we've got England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Channel Islands as individual own sort of governments or countries. You've then got the Isle of Man, which is its own government as well. But then you have the British Isles, and then you have the United Kingdom, and then you have Great Britain. So you've got all this different way of confusing things. So it's really crazy now. And something you would have read in that article, Maddie, with Total Sup. It's actually trying to almost join the dots between all the different federations. So, you imagine if we stick to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England, you've got at least 2 governing bodies in each country because you've got the surfing side for ISA, you've got the ICF side, which is depending on the country, you've got Paddle Cymru for Wales and Welsh Surfing Federation. England, you've got Surfing England, Paddle UK, same in Scotland, same in Northern Ireland. It's absolutely like the way that sort of industry governance has changed is totally different now as well. Feels like a completely different market and segment itself. It's completely different that way. So trying to deal with all the stakeholders and find the right person to speak to is totally different. Before you back when I started, you went to 1 or 2 people that kind of were involved in the sport, so it was really easy. Whereas now it's a lot more difficult to find the right information and understand. And I think we're probably quite lucky because we've been paddling a while, and certainly obviously when I started, you only had 1 or 2 sources of information, so you kind of learnt by your own mistakes for safety, you kind of learnt by your own mistakes for technique, and you sort of found your way. Whereas now it must be so confusing as a newcomer to paddling, to where do you start, what do you wear, where do you paddle, how do you paddle, what do you buy? There's so much more stuff available to you, kit, detail, safety messaging. Drives you mad,
Oh,
really.
absolutely. And
Used to be very
probably
simple.
you can probably testify too as well, being a coach, like, the amount of people now that are available online, that have, like, I know a few coaches that have their own apps, or just like you can sign up online. Like, you could have a coach all the way in Australia and be in North America and be training under that person. Like, it's just the way we can be all interconnected, and the services that can be provided to us in the community that are online or just everywhere around the world. Like, I can't even imagine what it must be like coming from your perspective of being like, wow, 2008 till 2025, like just that whole timeline. So I would love to know, actually, what do you see for the future of stand-up paddleboarding? I know we can't predict the future. We can't see, but if you could predict, or you could see into the future, what do you kind of suspect may happen? Like, do you think that stand-up paddleboarding still has the potential to keep growing? Or I know a lot of people in the industry right now are kind of saying we're in this bit of a standstill kind of spot right now. Others are saying foiling's taking over. Some people are optimistic about SUP in the Olympics. Some people are very pessimistic about it. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, like, what do you see for the future of stand-up paddling? And if not, obviously, for the world, just for your part of the world, like for GB.
I think actually it's really bright because I think we've only just really scratched the surface. Although we've got certainly here we've got a very mature market, as I said before. People like myself have been in it for a very long time. There's people that obviously have done it for a lot longer, and of course globally, it's got lots of history. And I think it's really important to remember that when anything we do, whether it's from a coaching point of view, for a racing point of view, or for a recreational point of view, it's really important that we remember the history, because we can see then, where it's gone right, where it's gone wrong. And, when I started, it was all about, okay, we can't let it do what windsurfing did. We can't let it go too elitist. And I understand that, because obviously that really hurt windsurfing. And of course, then kite surfing suffered from that, didn't it? It got, kit got better and better, got more performance orientated. Then suddenly you need the next kit. You need the next kit, while you're not good enough. And actually, that's not true. But I don't think SUP will have that. I think it's got a piece of that, but I think it will stay more grounded, because actually the people it's attracting in, especially in what I would call the latest bloom. So, I've seen this kind of trend of growth and then decrease, if you like, in popularity or activity. That's happened probably 4 times now, I think, since I started anyway. That I can really pinpoint those periods. But I think the people it's attracting now actually aren't doing it because it's a sport for them. They're doing it because it's an activity. It's good because it's recreational. So they're interested in it because it gets them away from the desk. It gets them away from the stress of everyday life. It's their time to, step back from family and have their own time. But likewise, if you've then got the ability to go and do a challenge, and that could be just, I'm going to paddle 4 times this week. It could be, I'm going to go race the Yukon, the opposite end of the scale. Totally different goals, totally different mindsets, but at the same time, you're still achieving something. And I think as long as we as an industry can go forward in that step and achieve something for everybody, then I think it'll be, a long-term thing. And, whether that's somebody training for the Olympics, if it gets there, whether that's somebody training just to, keep their fitness lifestyle together, it's never going to be the most popular thing in the world, because it's not as accessible as high rocks is, for example, which is, the world's most popular thing at the moment, and it's everywhere. That is super accessible because you don't need anything for that. You need some gym time and some trainers. You're off. Whereas SUP, you still need to commit to driving to the walls and getting your board out, pumping it up, deflating it nice and quietly, if you can. All that sort of stuff. It's still quite a big commitment, isn't it? But it's very accessible. And I think as long as people can put their own egos aside for it and actually then go, okay, well, how do we work with all the different federations? How do we work with the training providers? How do we make sure that, I'm putting out the information not for my own self gain, although yes, there's obviously that interest, because as a coach, I want to promote, I'm the best coach, I can do this. Yes, of course. But if it's done for the right reasons, then I think it will be a quite exciting next sort of 5-10 years. And that's where I see it going. I think it'd be really popular. I've had conversations actually this last month or so. A chap from the US SUP board reached out to me and was asking about the series, for example. How do you score your series? How does that? I've seen your video put out. How do you do it? How does that work? And it was amazing actually, because it's, we're connecting with people like you say from, this guy in the States who's asking me about how we do stuff, and I'm going, well, how do you do stuff? And he's talking about all the technology they're embedding and the platforms they're using. I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. Actually, we should try that. So there's still stacks to learn. It's not, it's definitely, it's mature, but young at the same time. I think there's so much to do. And a lot of people probably haven't even thought about whitewater supping, SUP polo. Probably don't know what that is. Yoga with your dog or your goat or whatever you want else to do as well. There's all these different avenues, isn't there? And, if you look at canoeing, cycling, athletics as sports, but actually they've got a huge activity base. Athletics, you go for a run, you got park run. Canoeing and kayaking, you've got everything from performance racing, sprinting, Olympic level stuff, to your family getting on a sit on top and go down, their local lake on the weekend in the summer because it's nice. Same with cycling, isn't it? You've got your hardcore enduro mountain bikers at the Olympics. You've also got your dad or mom taking their kid out to learn to ride for the first time. I think if we see it as that, then I think it's really bright. I think it'll be here for a long time. I think as a water sport, I think it could almost be the first truly accessible, long-standing water sport, really. Alongside obviously canoeing and kayaking, but in terms of something more modern in that respect, or something that's come about more recently. I'm very excited about it.
I agree
Anyway.
with you. I agree with you about that accessibility and like long-standing water sport, because it's truly, well, I'm biased, but because I like paddling, but I think it's paddling really is available for just so many people. You know, you don't have to, it's not even like riding a bike. You don't have to learn to paddle. Yes, of course, you do have to learn to paddle correctly, but most people can get on, and even if they're just sat on the board and moving around, like not perfectly, but riding a bike, you have to learn how to balance. With paddleboarding, yeah, if you want to do it properly, you do have to learn how to balance, but it's a much quicker and easier process. And I think there's so many, it's enjoyable before you get to that sort of ability of being able to officially do it. Whereas, yeah, lots of other sports are, it's a harder process to get into. I think, yeah, paddling is enjoyable for all ability levels. At
Absolutely.
least, yeah, that's what I think.
Mhm.
We've had
I know.
a couple of interesting conversations recently about actually joining people on the GBSUP stuff, and you know, one of them has been adaptive paddling. So you know, people with different abilities, how do they get involved? And we haven't really touched that yet. That's a whole new avenue for us, isn't it? And of course, you look at the Paralympic stuff, the para canoe, para kayaking. It's huge, isn't it? Absolutely huge. We haven't
Yeah,
really touched that yet.
absolutely.
So we're exploring that. And there's also you know, a completely new thing that's popped up that I've kind of seen before, which is subsailing. So the ability to deploy a sail, you know, as a little rig to come and sail downwind. And so we've got people that are interested in doing that at one of our events this year. Like, you know,
That
there's a whole
sounds like
host of stuff.
winging.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to wing. Yeah, pretty close.
I think that might be the full circle back to windsurfing.
Yeah, maybe.
Standing up with the sail.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned about adaptive paddling, because that's something they did at the ISAs in Denmark last year, and I think it was the first time. They had a few races at the end of the event. They were very short. You know, I can't remember how exactly they did it, but on like inflatable boards, and people who didn't have like use of their legs, for example, and couldn't stand, were sat in the chairs and paddling. You know, they can swim. It's not an issue. If they fall, they can climb back on. It's just a bit harder. And with shorter paddles, obviously. And it was really good to watch. You know, the competitive spirit was so high. Everyone was shouting and cheering, and it was super cool that we were able to share the event with so many people.
Love seeing that. I'm just like, that is so cool. And for it to be part of the ISA, it's like, wow, what a standard that has been set. So hopefully that continues as well.
Mm,
Yeah, it's a really big
yeah,
showcase,
I
isn't it?
agree.
And I think the beauty about paddleboarding over anything else actually on the water is it's not complicated. So that same board, you can go for your social paddle on. You can do a challenge tour with GBSUP on. You know, take part in a race. You can do some yoga on it. You could then get one of these adaptive chairs and you know, put your friend, sibling, whatever on there as well, and get them on the water, which is amazing, isn't it? And you can't really do that with a lot of a kit because it becomes too specialist or becomes too difficult to adapt, doesn't it? You know, that's amazing. You know, something almost a bit of a relaxation piece. I do a paddle from here, which is quite nice. On a flat day, I'll take the race board out on the coast here and just paddle up basically 5K against the tide. So I get my workout going up, and basically there's a lighthouse off the sort of headland here. So I just basically lie on the board for about 10 minutes and just listen. That's fantastic, actually. But I do sometimes wonder because, you know, someone sat out there, well, lying down on the board, you think the sun's on your face and it's really nice and a little bit of, you know, roll of the ocean, really nice. I do think someone's going to call the RLI out of me, which would be a bit embarrassing, but, you know.
There's a guy laying down on his board. I don't know if he's okay. Mayday. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, it's really nice when you're out there. So it's like, take those 10 minutes actually
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
flying back with the tide, then, which is quite nice.
Mhm. It would be really interesting on that note to find out. Obviously, you have some experience as well being part of the RNLI, which for any listeners outside of the UK who don't know, I'm sure Scott will fill in the gaps in a moment. But it's basically our lifeboat and like works with the Coast Guard, the UK's like water safety organisation, ran by volunteers. It would be really interesting to hear about your kind of perspective on safety and whether or not it's changed, or kind of the most important things that you think for paddlers, having seen like both sides as a paddler yourself, but also kind of seeing things that go wrong and how that happens. Do you have any thoughts on how paddlers can avoid those common safety issues?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm part of the local lifeboat crew here. So I'm a volunteer crew. So we've got what we call an inshore boat and an all-weather boat. So we go to anything from my dog's in the water, I can't get them out, to a sailing boat that needs a tow because it can't get back into port, to some of the offshore stuff with someone on a cargo ship who's got injured, for example, and they need a helicopter extraction. So we see a huge range of stuff. So we've got obviously the lifeboat side of things, which is what I'm on. We've also got the RNLI, which is the lifeguard. So they do all obviously the beach lifeguarding here as well. So I think the biggest thing that we'll see from a water user point of view is that sort of almost lack of knowledge or understanding, and it's getting into a situation which you then don't know how to deal with, and that's not because of the fault of the individual. That's just because of how quickly weather can change, how quickly the tides catch people out, things like that. So it's just being, I think the biggest thing is being aware of your situation before it happens, taking that moment to go, okay, well, actually, if I'm going to go out today, whether it's for a paddle or whether it's for a sail or whether it's for a walk on the coast, how long is that going to take me? Now, you don't have to know that it's going to take me 4 hours, 23 minutes and 10 seconds. Of course not. But, it's going to take 4.5 hours. Okay, well, if I'm going to go from here to there, 4.5 hours, a lovely coastal walk, you can literally walk from where I live. We're almost like on a peninsula. So you can almost walk from one side of the peninsula right the way around to the other side without even touching the shore itself. You can do it all on the beach or on the promenade. And it's a gorgeous walk. But knowing that you're going to go round the corner as well means the wind's going to change, or means the tide is going to change at some point, and things like that. And I think, what's nice about paddling now, we've put it back into a paddling context, there's so much more information available to you that you can find out. You go into Paddlogger, for example, you can find out about the weather. You can also track your paddle, which is fantastic. But also then you've got your safety flare, haven't you, with Paddle Live? So you've got all that ability just in one app. Never mind going on to, I use our weather apps here, just, what's available from the news stations. But I also use things like Windy because it's fantastic for giving me all that different information. And just being able to understand the data you can get available to you on your smartphone, just 10 minutes before you go out and say, okay, well, I'm going to go for paddle. It's going to take me whatever it's going to take me. Is it going to get dark? Am I expecting any changeable weather? Do I need to be aware of the tide's going to change halfway through and it's going to catch me out? Things like that. When I started paddling, there was none of that. You just went out. I don't even think Magic Seaweed was called Magic Seaweed back then. I don't think that was a thing, was it? Yeah, I think it was that long ago. Now, now it's Surfline, isn't it? And back then they were super basic. It told you the swell, obviously, from a surfing point of view, but it didn't give you any data really around the sort of weather and the predictive modeling that's all in there now. So it's really changed, and you can really get a load of detail within a few clicks of a button, and can't you now, which is great. And actually, people always worry about, like, I've done some of the safety group stuff with Paddle UK, and a big thing was offshore winds, obviously. And actually, I think for the most part we got it wrong, because we started saying about, well, what about that family going down the beach? What about those, they got a board for the first time, they were unpacking it for the first time. Actually, that's wrong, because actually they're probably the ones that are going to be the safest, because they're going to stay close to shore. Yes, of course, it could happen. They could get blown out to sea, or the kid could paddle off and, not realize how quick they can actually start paddling. But at the same time, I think it's the person that's going to get most into trouble is that progressive person that's been paddling 2 or 3 times, or even for a couple of years. And they go, okay, I've paddled around my lake now and I enjoy that. I'm going to go to the coast. I want to paddle. I want to do one of these lovely, they've seen this guy, Scotty, paddle down the coast and it looks great on his Instagram. Yeah, great. Fantastic. But what they don't have is that years of experience of going, okay, well, today I should go for a paddle, or look at the conditions and I go, actually, maybe this is a bit beyond what I can achieve, or maybe the conditions aren't looking as good as they said on the app. And that's that physical experience, isn't it? And they don't have that. So they're the person that's more likely to get into difficulty, not for any fault of their own, just because they want to go and push the boundaries, essentially, or get out for a paddle. And I think that's then the ability to say, should I go or should I not go? And I have it here. I come down the hill when I drop my kid off at school, and then it opens up onto the coastline. You see these beautiful big choppy rollers coming in. I'm like, oh, get the race board out, go for a big long offshore paddle, upwind, downwind stuff. And I go, no, because it's not right. The wind's not right. But I can see that instantly, whereas somebody else might not see that. And there was a great example in the RNLI from Wales where a group of paddlers went out, and there were 16 of them. They got rescued one of the big lifeboats, and the reason they actually got caught out was where they started was perfectly flat and calm, no wind, sheltered, absolutely fine. They all went for a lovely paddle, but they paddled round the headland essentially. And of course, as soon as they got around the headland, it was offshore wind, choppy, tide was running because they'd gone out of that shelter. They just didn't realise that would happen just because they hadn't got that knowledge. And I think that's, obviously then that's why we're here as the Art and Lie. We go out and help these people, which is, we do not judge in any sort of way. We've had all sorts of people. Kite surfers on the rocks here is a classic one. But situation happens. We don't judge. We just go and assist the person. But we always like to try and find out why, because then we can say, okay, well, knowing the area or knowing the location, what happened there. And a case in point like that rescue in Wales, it was just a case of, well, we went a little bit too far. It was something so simple as we just paddled for 5 minutes longer than we probably should have. And they just didn't realise that going around the corner there can change the way the wind works. And I think when we started these safety messages, they were all too black and white. It was offshore wind is bad. Offshore wind actually isn't that bad. It's only bad if you go into the situation where it can change the situation. So it's not as black and white as I think it obviously is. But yeah, there's lots of stuff that was put out originally around safety messaging. So simple things like take a phone, check the weather, check the tides, have a little bit of a plan, and then you'll be fine. I think you've got so much more ability to get access to data and people who know as well. I always say to people, if you're going for a paddle and you're not sure, wherever you are in the world, I've taught people and coached people or dealt with people all over the world. I said, if you're not sure, just drop me a message and I'll get back to you. There's plenty of people that who will help and give you advice. They've got the experience as well. You can say, probably not, or yeah, go for it. You'll be fine.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's such a good thing to touch on, especially for the progressive paddler. Because like if you're a recreationalist and say you're new to the sport and or the activity and you've never taken a lesson, then I could see where, in that scenario that the person or the group just paddled out and they went 5 minutes too far around the headland. Like, I get it, right? Lack of awareness, just they don't know any better. But if you're a progressive paddler and you're trying to push the limits a little bit, you're trying to test out new waters, you do have that responsibility, I feel like, to take care of obviously yourself and your own well-being and your safety. But if you don't know, like, don't be afraid to ask. Like, don't be afraid to reach out or search for that local knowledge. Or I'm super biased, but just download Paddle Logger because Paddle Live is a freaking gem, I'll tell you that. And it's so true. I think that's and oftentimes as a progressive paddler, because it's in your routine just to get your stuff, go on the water, it can be so easy to just push that off to the side, right? It can be so easy
absolutely.
to just be like, nope, I know what I'm doing, I'm fine, I'm gonna go. And those are the scenarios where people can find themselves in tricky situations. So I love that you brought up that point. I think that's quite fascinating.
Well, we had a situation here in the UK probably about 4 years ago now, where a lady, she's probably one of the first known casualties of paddleboarding, unfortunately. And it's something so simple, like she'd been paddling a couple of years. Obviously, the outcome wasn't great. She unfortunately died, but she went to a paddle on a particular river. Now, as someone who has been paddling for a while, somebody said, "Oh, have you seen this incident? This lady went for a paddle here." And I went, "Oh, don't tell me. Let me guess. She got into difficulty with the tide and got caught and drowned." And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, that's such a shame, is it? Because as an experienced paddler, and certainly in that location, you would know that that's probably the time to avoid it because of the tidal flow and the stream that happens there. But as a progressive paddler, you might not know that unless you've looked at some data or even asked one of the canoe clubs and kayak clubs. And it's just such a shame because it's so avoidable at the same time. And I don't want to put a damp squib on it, but it's something that could have been easily avoided just with that bit of knowledge. But you do push the boundaries, and I think there's a whole piece of governance stuff going on, and I don't know what it's like obviously around the world, but in the UK, where they're doing this what we call a kite marking exercise in the UK. So essentially, it's like we have this little logo. It looks like a kite, and that says that the operator, whatever that operator does, is up to a standard, and that's a big thing that's happening in the UK now, which is fantastic. Because it'll mean like the higher operations and the sort of mobile beach setups that happen in the summer will have to then suddenly be at a standard. Because I've been at events before, I've just been paddling before, and you see an operation on the beach, and someone grabs a board and goes out paddling on a higher operation, and you're going, "You okay out here? Because you're quite far out now, and yes, there's an offshore breeze or the tide's happening." And they go, "Oh, it's a bit hard to paddle back, isn't it?" It's like, "Oh, okay, I'll help you then." And I'm looking back at the beach going, well, the higher guy's he's not coming out, is he? He's not moved. You're going to be responsible for your client. Oh, okay, I'll do it then. Fine. So I think that's, out of that stuff, I think you're going to see, a lot better standards from an organization point of view, official point of view, which would be great as well. So that's going to happen over the next few years for sure, which would be quite cool. So yeah, I've been involved in some of those conversations, which it's been great to have because it's, it's long overdue in many respects.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It sounds really interesting, and it's great to hear your perspective on so many different things. Before we finish up, it would be great just to ask one last question. If, from your perspective as a race director who interacts with so many different types of paddlers, as somebody who volunteers with the RNLI, as a coach and as a paddler yourself, if one of those progressive paddlers came up to you and ask for some advice, for some tips, they're just getting into paddling, they've been paddling it a few times, and they want some just really general rules on staying safe on the water whilst also pushing their boundaries so that they can improve, what would you say to them?
My general motto in anything, it covers the race stuff, it covers the coaching stuff, it covers just general, paddling stuff, is keep it simple. I think it's so easy to go too far with your detail, too far with, your equipment choices. I should have that board because it's got 2 liters more volume, and all that sort of. It probably won't make that much difference in the grand scheme of things, unless you're at the elite level where you can tell the difference between a certain volume of board and shape and style and stuff. Actually, keep it simple. Don't be afraid to try things. You'll learn through failure, as long as you've thought about the risk and thought about your process of doing that. That's what I always say to my clients when I'm coaching is, try a different technique, try a different paddle, try a different setup. Don't be afraid of that because it will teach you something. And whether you think it's a good thing or whether it's actually a negative thing, that can be just as good. So keep it simple, have your plan. I'm going to go paddle 10K. Okay, what's that 10K going to be? It's going to be up and down the coast. Okay. If I do that, then what's the tide going to do? What's the weather going to do? And then you've pretty much covered it then. Give yourself a little bit of margin in everything. So if you're going for 10K, plan for 12. If you're going to paddle for an hour, plan for an hour and 20. Just give yourself that little bit of room, but then don't be afraid to try it and don't be afraid to get involved. And we're seeing this quite a bit at the moment. So GBSUP has often been focused on the racer. It's about the national series, the rankings and all that sort of stuff. But actually we want to encourage more leisure people to come and get involved in giving it a try, get a challenge themselves. And we know that there's that question mark of, okay, well, yeah, but it's a racing series and it's hardcore, and there's people like Holly who are training all the time. There's people like Blue who competes on the international scene. There's people like Scott who tell you that, in 2018 he was really quick, all that sort of stuff. But it's not about that, is it? It's about you being there and actually getting on the start line. And actually the gap between what you're doing at a recreational level and what you're doing at a entry level racing is actually not that far at all. In fact, you're probably doing more in your recreational paddles, to be honest. So give it a go. Don't be afraid, but keep that simple. So we have people that come to the start line, and I coach some of these people as well. So I can see it from that point of view, and they go, okay, well, I'm going racing for the first time, Scott. And I go, yeah, okay, yeah, what we can do about it? Well, I don't know about my nutrition. I don't know what to wear. And I go, okay, put yourself in this scenario. Get up in the morning. You're going to go for a paddle today. What do you do? Well, I get my paddling gear and I go paddling. Okay, cool. Okay, it's race day. What are you going to do? I'll get my gear and go paddling. That's it. Keep it simple. you're already doing it, so just do the same. Don't take a fancy hydration drink you've never trained with. Don't go and eat some fancy meal that you've never had before for nutrition stuff. High protein, super duper, fast releasing energy bar. You don't need that. Unless you train on it and it's part of your structure, you don't need that. And I've been there and I've done this and I've got the t-shirt, right? So my best race was 2017 Heather Dart. I still go back to it. The night before I had a curry. The morning before the race, I ate a curry. Why? Because it's what I eat and train with anyway. I didn't need any hydration stuff. I had some curry, and that was it gave me energy, it gave me all the fuel I need because that's what I ate anyway. So it worked. So keep it simple, And if you're ever unsure, ask somebody, and it could be someone like me, it could be someone like yourselves, Holly and Maddie. It could be somebody you see just on the water who's also a paddler. They might not know themselves. But also, there's lots of different, the great thing about the Iron Alive, for example, is we've got a whole community water safety team, and they'll be walking along the coast on nice days and making sure people are safe. Go and ask them because they know the location. Reach out to people. And the beauty about Paddlogger, it's a community of people, as you well know, isn't it? We're all connected that way, wherever we are in the world. So, reach out to somebody and you'll be able to help you for sure.
Oh,
That's
thank you so
awesome.
much for sharing that.
All right, folks. So
Yeah.
you
Welcome.
heard it. Your pre-race meal is curry.
Telling
If
you
you
it
took
works.
away anything from that, it's
Yeah, this whole conversation.
The one tip. There's actually a photo of me eating that curry. I can prove it.
What kind of curry was it?
It was, I don't know if you ever had it before, sag paneer, which is like basically spinach and cheese. So there's method in my madness here. Got the fatty stuff, and you got obviously the goodness from the vegetables, yeah, and chicken. I'm going to say jalfrezi. It wasn't spicy, but it had a bit of heat, and obviously some rice in there, some mixed fried rice.
Sounds good.
That's awesome.
I'll try it next time. No, it's been great hearing all of your insights. If anyone who is listening has, also found this conversation really interesting and wants to get in touch with you specifically and ask you a few questions, whether it's about, coming along to GBSUP, whether it's about coaching or whether it's just to have a chat and say hi, where's the best place for them to reach out to you and find you?
Sure, and anytime, honestly, people can drop me a message, no problem at all. Social media, so I've got Hayward Sports, which is my coaching business. So you'll find us on Instagram or Facebook. And of course, GBSUP, either, again, Instagram or Facebook, or you can drop us an email as well and just go on the website, gbsup.co.uk, and you'll find the details in there and you'll get straight through to me, basically. So anytime, any questions, even if you want to know what curry you should eat before the race, just let me know. Happy to help.
Is that maybe that's what the coaching involves, is just different curry flavors.
Scotty's nutrition plan: curry.
This is why I'm not the elite of the elite, right? There's probably a limit.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. It's been great to chat to you. And I will actually see you maybe tomorrow or maybe at the weekend. And yeah, we hope you have a great week otherwise. And thank you everybody for listening in and tuning in today. It's been really cool to have you here, Scott.
Thanks very much.
Very
I'll
much.
see you at the weekend and looking forward to it. Yeah, see you all soon.
Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening to this episode of the Rise and Glide podcast brought to you by Paddlogger.
We just have two small things to ask you before you close this episode. The first one, if you enjoyed it, please leave us a rating and a review. It really makes a big difference. And the second one is to go to the App Store and download Paddlogger today.
We can't wait to see you on the next episode.